In 1986, I started Ziegler Super Systems. And that's where we start today. 42 years. What have I learned? What do I know? I got a reputation for growing dealerships to the big numbers. How do you do that? In case you're sitting there trying to do a little math on your calculator, I'm 72 years old. So I know a lot of 60-year-olds that are older than me. I got to tell you, what have I learned in 42 years? Hit the first one. In 42 years, I got 5 killer strategies I want to share with you today. Hire the best people and pay them too much. I was a senior manager of some of the biggest dealerships in the country, and I always made sure we overpaid the people. That is not common in the business today. Do you notice that? Next slide. Why does it seem that the super performers seem to be moving along? The last couple of jobs I had in the car business, I left because of pay cuts. Not because the dealer wanted to cut my pay. That's not the case. But the truth was I had outdistanced my pay plan. So one thing I found out as an executive manager, you've got to have executive pay plans that make sense. Everything I learned was performance generated. You know, unless you are dealer sibling and you're part of the Lucky Sperm Club, you know, you have to be qualified in my world to be promoted, unqualified to be fired. Everything about what I think is quality of people based on their production. A pay plan is a job description. When you pay somebody, you pay them for what you want to achieve. And so many executive managers don't get that. The best example in a dealership of somebody that works their pay plan is the F&I manager. True or false? They can work that pay plan. They know exactly, to the decimal point, what their performance will yield. Is that true? So anyway, there must be a path to career advancement. When I was managing dealerships, and I have consulted thousands of dealerships, I have grown dealerships to super big numbers. There's got to be a career path. What's the 2 reasons that people leave car dealerships? Only 2 reasons. Money and spouse pressure. Does that make sense? Hello, Duck. I didn't see you sneak in here. Money and spouse pressure. You know, it's amazing. My wife was on my ass about my hours my entire career. And I told her, I said, look, I could get a $30,000 a year job like your previous spouse. Now, let me pack your bags. No problem. So that was what that was all about. Spouse pressure. So one thing I did as an executive manager is I shortened the schedules. One thing I learned is put 3 teams on. Every dealership that did any amount of volume, I was working with dealerships that did 500,000 units a month. Any dealership that does volume, I will divide into 3 teams. That's managers and salespeople. And 100% of the time, one of those teams will be off. 100% of the time, one of those teams. So it doesn't appear that I flooded the floor because one team is absent every day of the month except the last 3 days of the month, all hands on deck. And that includes everybody would get a weekend, a month off. You know, your spouse is working, they're off on the weekends. Your kids are off on the weekends. We don't let people have family time. Sunday is not family time. But one weekend a month in my world, from Friday at noon until Monday at noon, they're not allowed to be in the dealership. That means even if they want to be in the dealership. Well, I'm having a bad month, work harder while you're here. You know, because you're not going to double cross your spouse on the weekend that we designated you to be off and ruin her plans or his plans. No, you're not going to do that. You're going to be off on your weekend off. Your spouse can plan it 3 months in advance. Does that make sense to you guys? Next slide. Okay, 42 years, poorly designed pay plans. Compensation not tied into production. Dealers are not focused on the longer term deal. The last job I had in the car business, I made $17,000 a month, 4 months in a row. And that was, we're talking 1986. And I think the dealer raised his hand, there might have been a Bible involved. He said, I will never cut your pay plan. 4 months in, he cut my pay plan. I went home with my wife, I said, well, I quit the dealership, y'all know. And we had made a lot of money, we didn't have a lot of money. We've been attempting to have a baby, and that was very expensive. So, made a lot of money, didn't have a lot. And I said, okay, if I can't start this company, she said, who else is doing this? Nobody. I'm creating an industry. So I started Ziegler Super Systems with a promise that if I couldn't make it go in 90 days, I'd go back in the car business. You got to be focused on the longer term goal. The general manager of that dealership said, Jim, you made more money last month than I did. I said, okay, let's switch jobs. I'll do your job and still make more money than you. No problem. It's all about focus and intent. Zero deviation, zero tolerance, and zero defects. Every time I put together a process in the dealership, those 3 zeros come into effect. We don't put defects in a program. We iron out a program until 100% of the defects are out of it. Zero deviation, that's where most of you fail. Because you've got people outside your process. You've got people that don't have to abide by the rules. You got that salesperson with the attitude that thinks they're bulletproof because they sold 20 units. Well, excuse me, I will fire their ass and get 3 green pieces sell 5 before I put up with that. I'll give them a bad reference. Oh, Barry. Anyway, zero tolerance. We do not tolerate deviators, period. Slide. Strategy number 2. Study your competitors. If your competitor is doing something particularly good and aggressive, find out what they're doing and mirror that activity. Do it better than they do, execute better. You know, I see so many people today that don't get you are in a competitive world. And our business today is contracting. There are only, let's see, we sold about 70 million cars the last couple of years, new and used. 70 million, new and used. And we're cramming that into less than 300 million licensed drivers. We're reaching saturation. Everybody that once got one, you're putting them in 84-month contracts. You're not doing finance, you're doing marriages. So everybody's got one, wants one. So in other words, if you're going to do business in the next couple of years, you've got to take that business away from a competitor that has that business. You've got to study your competitors. And me personally, give me another slide, big guy. I'm going to watch where they're doing their marketing. Okay, your website is your showroom. Google is the weapon. AdWords, social media clicks. What are they doing? There are ways to find out what they're doing and what they're paying for it. Always mirror what they're doing, shadow them, and outbid them. What product are they selling most? So many dealers today specialize in a type of car or a type of sale. I bet you Ford dealers got one dealer in your market that specializes in F-150 sales. Am I making good sense? Silverado sales. Tundra sales, I don't know. What are they selling the most of? What's their strategy? Physically study what they are doing, what vendors they are using, and what they're paying those vendors. One thing about vendors, and I got a lot of vendors in the room, sponsors and such. Some vendors charge one dealer $7,000 a month for the same service that the dealer across the street, identically, item for item, is paying $2,500 a month. I own a web domain I have never activated, but I own the domain. It's called findoutwhatotherdealerspaid.com. That scares the shit out of some of these vendors. I won't mention names. Cars.com, Cox Company. But anyway, that scares the hell out of some people that I own that domain. Because you need to find out what your competitors are doing and what they're paying for their services.